Hi, it's Warren Whitlock with the Emerging Technologies with Warren podcast. On this podcast, I like to talk about things that make it simple and easy and remove as much friction as I can to get future technology into the hands of everybody. Today, we're talking about how anyone can buy Bitcoin today. It's not too late. Bitcoin hasn't left the recently I've seen record prices and coming to the understanding that a lot of people think that somehow this is topped out and due to go down again. That's not the issue. This is not investment advice. I can't tell you whether you want to buy Bitcoin, whether you need to have it in your portfolio. I can report that almost everyone I'm talking to today, when it's the general public and not investors, are asking, can I buy Bitcoin? Or I don't even know where to start. So that's what this is about today on this episode of Emerging Technologies with Warren. So if you're going to buy Bitcoin, first of all, you need to decide, is Bitcoin something for you? What is the Bitcoin anyway? Bitcoin is not even really a currency. It's a representation of ownership of a token, which can be called currency because we could trade in seashells and make that our currency, or coins or paper or whatever. Most of the money today that we use to trade in a transaction is there because some government says it's worth something. And here in the US, we know our government is pretty screwed up, but we've got the best dollar in the world. And it has to do with banking practices and legal issues and things like that. We also know that if you study it a bit, there's a lot of holes in the thing, the deficit spending, the amount of control that entities and regulations have over anyone new trying to do anything. Big old mess. However, the big thing that Bitcoin does is now allow us to live in a digital age where no longer do we need permission of a king or a government or a ruler or even the office of regulation. The people behind Bitcoin decided that what we really can trust in is math. 2 plus 2 equals 2, unless you do some really creative accounting, and always will. So we can't set what the price is going to be. If you have fish and I have coconuts and we want to trade, how many coconuts per fish or how many fish per coconut? That's what currency trading is all about. It's deciding what we have of value that is exchanged for somebody else. The difference with Bitcoin is that we now have something that says we always know what it will be worth. 1 Bitcoin means how much energy and computation power it takes to do a very hard math problem that only Bitcoin miners can do. Could you be a Bitcoin miner? Yeah, sure. It's technically not that difficult. I've set up for Bitcoin mining before. It's being able to have a very high speed processor, good equipment, running an algorithm, and then it's just a matter of time until randomly you win. Today, the difficulty in doing it has increased, and that's why we see the price in US dollars of Bitcoin going up, is because how much more difficult it becomes. Every 4 years, there's something about every 4 years, there's something called the halving, and the difficulty of creating a Bitcoin goes up. Right now, it's 3.25 Bitcoins are awarded every 10 minutes. And that 0.25 is an interesting thing. Yeah, it doesn't have to be whole Bitcoin. So if you want to buy Bitcoin and you understand that the value is there long term, then now is a great time to buy it because we're still early in the curve. What happens when you buy a Bitcoin, you're buying a 1 point or 0.00004 amount of a Bitcoin, and then that translates into a US dollar amount. You can see that in actually any browser, definitely any AI chat and websites meant to do that. But you can just in the basic calculator that is on, say, Google search, you can type in how much Bitcoin can I buy for $67.43? And it'll tell you. When the Bitcoin price gets up to be millions of dollars, the currency that we trade in or think about will probably be expressed in Satoshis for most of us. So a Satoshi is just a tiny part of it. And instead of having a zero and all 0.00000 out there, they just call it a Satoshi. That's built into the way Bitcoin was built. Satoshis were so close to worthless that nobody did a transaction for one Satoshi. Today, you could go on the internet and say, I want to buy Satoshi, and something will tell you how to buy a Satoshi. And it's the same as buying a Bitcoin, just moving the decimal point around. So compare it to pennies and dollars. So if suddenly a dollar was able to buy a full ounce of gold instead of it costing many dollars to buy 1 ounce, then 1 penny would be worth quite a bit too. So it goes up exactly as Bitcoin does. And so we get into, first of all, I want to talk about what you need, and then I'll come back to something about how many you buy and how to do it. But to buy, basically, if you have internet access and you have a smartphone or computer, in other words, if you're capable of watching or listening to this podcast right now, you have the access needed to be able to buy a Bitcoin. And then you've got to get an exchange or wallet app. And there are some that work all over the world. Coinbase is the biggest. There's Binance, very popular outside the United States, where there's weird legal rules that are getting changed. I was just talking about it for Philippines. That was coins.ph. It just doesn't matter. Find one, but then find one that maybe a friend knows about or that you've read a lot about in the news, so you know that it's something legitimate. What you're going to have to do is have a legitimate ID to get into it. And so you don't want to be uploading worse than your money that you could lose in a transaction like this. You can lose your identity and then have all sorts of bad things happen. So anything you're doing on the internet, make sure that it's somebody that you can trust. When you get to that point, again, if everybody else is doing it, makes sense, or if your friends are using it, plus news stories, media, TikToks, whatever, people talking about it, be careful for somebody saying this is going to be the best thing going, and it's the first and only cryptocurrency based on a walrus, and walrus teeth will fund this, and we will all get rich. Or even worse, it's based on nothing. We're just going to invent it, and because Bitcoin did it, we're going to do it. Stay away from anything like that. We're talking about Bitcoin because right now it is like nearly 60% of all transactions in crypto are Bitcoin. The rest, Ethereum, Solana, on down, are all a fraction of that. Ethereum is the biggest of what's left over, and then it goes down from there. So in the last year or two, buying Solana was better than buying Bitcoin for average return. But over time, Bitcoin is unique in being an algorithm that doesn't have anybody cracking it thus far. Maybe in the future, some quantum computer will be able, but the one you can trust like money is Bitcoin. Everything else is called an altcoin because it's not Bitcoin. And by definition, it's not Bitcoin. Ethereum was actually created to fill some things that Bitcoin wouldn't do. Not so much to be something that you hold and retains value. Over time, it's done extremely well. It's the first, did it very well, and continues to. But recently, it had an even bigger dip than Bitcoin. It was a great time to buy it because it's going to go up again. But or so it seems. That's not investment advice. And so we're back to getting the wallet set up. When you get to any of these websites, they'll have some kind of process. Some want you to hold up your passport or government ID and take a picture with it so that it matches and sends that off. Because actually, there are a lot of places. I just read yesterday about Apple stores in China getting hit with a guy who came in with 37 different IDs, all with the same picture. Yeah, they weren't legitimate IDs. So sometimes you want to identify the person the picture matches, but sometimes even more. Something like, how are you going to put cash into the wallet, being a bank, a credit card, e-wallet. So it's all the same trust stuff you would do to set up a bank account or one of these online money exchange systems. If you're able to do that and get set up, able to fund it in some way, and this is not about an amount of money. Bitcoin, as we record this, was last trading for about $111, $111,000. You don't need $111,000 to do this. You can do it with $111 or $11 or $1. The transaction is the same until you get to the fees. And let's get into that. To buy, you sign in, you have your KYC, know your customer information. You've identified yourself. You're going to be given some kind of a passphrase, password, send you an email, send you a text to verify who you are. All those methods are used. Some use all of them at the same time. And then you're going to get a very long string of numbers, at least 15, probably double that, or you're going to get a series of words. When you get to the words and it's a series of words, 12 is common. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. And they're random words. In my case, they're always in English. I don't know what else they do, but that you get these words and you copy them and you keep them in a very safe place. Don't put it on a post-it in your computer. It's like a password, right? But have some method, however you keep passwords, and maybe even more than you keep passwords, in the vault, whatever, so that you can get to it. And on paper means that you can't make a mistake and allow access to it on your computer. So you want to get that as safe as possible, either very strong encryption or paper, and then in the safest place you can. And that identifies you as a private key. And that key to this key concept of this is that you are understood to be this person by your public key, which is another long string of characters, sometimes hidden behind a username, and get identified to get into the program. The private key, never, ever share with anybody. So it's one of the things they see. I see this as comments on my YouTube videos. Somebody says, I have the following phrase and I need help getting to my wallet. And then they put the 12 words in there. The first time I saw it, I was quite alarmed that somebody, and I responded with with what you just posted, you don't have anything in your wallet. Anybody can take those 12 words and get into your wallet. I wrote out that response, and then I saw 3 more from various people and realized it was a spam. But so those are all now deleted, and don't bother with them. If you see somebody posting 12 words, they are either compromised or it's a scam. Stay away from that sort of thing. Your 12 words, never, if I ask you for them, don't give them to me. The only way you would do is if your trusted brother comes in, your best friend comes in and is helping you do this, you can't do that. But then, of course, if you're trying to get in and you're having problem, technically somebody can help you, but they better be right with you. And as soon as you do it, you generate a new one and change it. And because otherwise, whatever happens to your friend can then compromise your account. You give them to your friend and maybe they don't write them down, but maybe they do. Maybe give them a piece of paper and they pick that up and put it in their wallet in case you need help again, so we can help you by phone. And then they get robbed the next day. And so somebody has that piece of paper. Do not do anything that gives up your private key. That's probably the most important thing I'm going to say today, except something about safety. It's where are you going to keep it? If you have that phrase privately, you can restore everything else. So that's the one you want to keep safe. The rest of where to keep the wallet can get hacked or have a problem. The biggest hack I know of ever, and big in size, not big in dollar volume, because Bitcoin's worth a lot more now. Many years ago, there was a Mt. Gox, MTGOX exchange, was the most popular exchange for Bitcoin. And they had somebody hack their software. They had not kept up with the protocols that were being released as ways to make sure that an exchange kept things safe. They were hacked. Not only did they go out of business, but access to all that Bitcoin was gone because they had all the private keys and everything like that. It got stopped. Most of the Bitcoin was intact. And recently I heard that most of the people have been paid back because the Bitcoin went up in price so much. They were able to restore monetarily those people. So if they had $1 million in there in Bitcoin and lost access, years later, they had what used to be $1 million worth paid back as them getting a check for $1 million or even $2 million that was paying that off. These are examples pulled out of the air. I have no idea about the exact numbers about that hack. But for the most part, Coinbase has not lost everybody's information. It would be definitely something a pirate or a hacker would go after. So they're working very hard on their team of people doing that. But I have friends who say never leave your money in Coinbase. I have other people saying it's almost as safe as just having Bitcoin yourself. Definitely not. There's hot wallets where you have a wallet, and it can even be a Coinbase wallet. You have some other wallet. There's a lot of other systems that do that. And I want this to be a little bit timeless, and I want it to work in every country. Jurisdictions change, and some people only operate in certain countries. Korea has been very good at building all sorts of exchanges and things. Also, the biggest hack I was ever involved with was somebody gave Bitcoin to an exchange in Korea, and then they put a robot on trading the crypto that was being released, kept the Bitcoin as their fee, and the other coin went from $1 a piece down to sub penny, or basically worthless. And it had been facilitated by I think it was 8 Bitcoin, which was high price. It was like $30,000 back then for 8 of them. And the coin they were trying to launch, the token they were trying to launch, went to worthless. And that's because they trusted an exchange. The jurisdictions had Korea leading, but some of the best stuff uses a lot of Korean exchanges. So I can't say good or bad on there. Or tomorrow we may find out that they're all cursed or that they all got better, or somebody's going to leave a comment saying, you're wrong. You don't know what really happened. I don't. But one of the things I know is if I was Korean living in Korea, I would get to know the company in any way I could outside of what the exchange is. In the US, I know a lot about Coinbase. They're okay. I know a lot about Binance. I opened up a Binance account, put a small amount of money in there, and then could not access the account for 2 years because of safety KYC reasons. And I did all the right stuff, and they said it's up for review, and then it just sat there. And their token is in the BNB, actually went up during that time. I'm not hurt in any way. I'm able to get into it, but that's because it's US Binance instead of worldwide Binance, which is apparently still doing very well. But the ultimate is to take that key you have on paper, totally off the system, totally off of anything electronic, and then have a cold wallet. You can buy a card that is a cold wallet, and when you hook it up to an exchange or to wherever you're buying, move everything into that, and then it works just like currency, just like a bag of cash. It is something that you have possession of it. You are in control. Nobody else can get it because physically you have control of it. If you've got a safe or you've got a hiding place that you feel like is going to be safe, that's the place to keep it. You're able to recover funds if that gets stolen, but you can't do it by just calling the company and saying, I forgot my password. It doesn't work like that. You have to rebuild it off of the keys and things like that. If you feel like that's a safe way to do it, where you keep your food for a month and guns and it's in your bunker, then you only know the secret entrance, and then maybe that's a place to keep it. I don't know. I'm somewhere in between. I have some cold wallets, I have some hot wallets, but I think basically the part you have to really rely on is yourself. It's nice that somebody wants to know who you are. It's even better to know who you are, to know what you can trust yourself with, who you can trust with it in your personal life, and keep that safe. And a cold wallet is a great thing. And if you're looking for which brand you can trust or anything, take an old phone. You can trade in a cell phone when you buy a new one. You also can keep. I have dozen lying around the house because you're not supposed to throw them away for the battery. And I also like to have gadgets. And I can take one of those, hook it up, run the software, and this software will run on new and old devices. Hook it up, transfer money to that address, then disconnect it from the internet, disconnect it from power, and keep it in a safe. And there's no way anybody's going to get to that. If I get it, then I'm back to just hooking it up and using it like it was my current phone, which, not suggesting this is better than anything, just the thing to look at. All that's called cold wallet versus hot wallet. And I think being familiar with these terms is the most important thing, because then they tell you the easy way to buy some Bitcoin right now, no matter how much you have. Let's use the $11 example. Go to one of these services, get yourself a wallet. And in fact, I encourage everybody to do that. This is not investment advice. This is knowledge. You're here to learn. Let's learn by doing. Get yourself a wallet, hook it up to a bank, to a credit card, to whatever you have. Don't worry about whether or not you're going to make or lose money. We're in a bull market, and it seems like if you're listening to this anytime near the day I'm recording it, it looks pretty good. But I could be wrong. Something could change. Somebody could drop a nuclear bomb tomorrow, and that could send the price sky high or send the price to nothing, just based on what people think. I think the cases are, if something real physical happens, that it's going to go up. But again, I can't advise you about that. What I can advise you in, if you have $10, $100, 11, because that's what we've been saying, whatever you put that into something that you can buy Bitcoin in. How many Bitcoin can you buy for $100? And none. But you can buy Satoshis. You can buy a part of a Bitcoin, and it can be denominated in BTC. Your wallet, when you type in how many you want to buy, and you type in 0.000001, it'll give you a price. Then you get into the one more hurdle you have to worry about after you get through with the KYC stuff, which is, this is easy enough to do. Something to worry about is what the transaction going to cost. A Bitcoin, every transaction is recorded on the Bitcoin blockchain, and there's a price to it, depending on how many other transactions are happening, depending on whether you wait to get put in a block with others. Early days of Bitcoin, the software was all set up. The standard for the exchanges was that you would get it within 40 minutes. And those kind of transactions are gathered together and done as one block. And that's why it's called blockchain. And the block of transactions go together. If you're willing to wait, you'll get a lower price on most things. Bitcoin is hard to say. And then there's other things that happen. If you go to one of the big exchanges, they own some Bitcoin. They make money by trading it and taking a very small fraction. And so you want to make sure you check that. You don't want to have a $20 fee to invest your $11. If it's a $2 fee, that would be extreme. But it's not like banks where they need to have a certain minimum to make the system work. It's all electronic. It's all done instantly as far as the bits moving around. But to be verified and recorded on the blockchain might take you a few minutes. You're doing this for practice. Find out what that fee is. Decide that you're comfortable with it. If you're not, time to go do a little bit more research and figure it out. Because if you're buying with a credit card, you're going to end up paying whatever it costs to be able to handle that credit card through a merchant account, which is going to be a few percent right there. So you could pay and then there could be a minimum. If you try to buy a taco with your credit card or debit card, the vendor might take it, might not take it. Usually the vendor will take it. But when he tries to record that into his deposit into his bank, there's going to be something like a 25-cent per transaction fee. Hey, you're doing a $1 transaction, 25 cents is huge. You're doing a $100 transaction, it's no big deal. There's no fee like that in Bitcoin. It's all done as a percentage, but that varies depending on how busy the network is. So if you want to move $1 billion by coin, it's the same transaction as moving $1. It's going to take whatever time the system's going to be. And obviously, when finding a buyer for 1 billion Bitcoin, it's probably a little bit different. But if you're trying to buy it, somebody will offer it. But if you move $1 million, move $1,000, move $10, it's all the same time in transactions. One of the great speed up anti-friction things that electronic money does. And that's why we're here. We want a world where we can move things around much faster and be able to settle without having a bank involved, without having any kind of middleman. The contracts and code that are set up to make Bitcoin work so far have not been hacked, and the cryptology works. The other thing that works is somebody can't just change their mind. There's a new banking rule or a bank sets a policy. Oh, from now on, every time you do a deposit, we're going to add a $5 charge or $100 charge or whatever that is. It's not possible in Bitcoin because Bitcoin moves through the system to other people that have a Bitcoin mining. And so you don't need to be a miner. You just need to know somebody with a mine, which is everybody I mentioned and then some. There are probably millions of nodes by now. I'm sure somebody could give me the right number, but thousands, millions, whatever. It's a lot. It's more than you can count. And you don't know where all of these are, what country they're in, what's going on. But you would have to own 51% or some fraction over 50% of the nodes before you could make changes and do something that favors yourself in Bitcoin. It's at the point it can't be done. Or you'd have to get all nodes to agree to something. And there have been changes, and they've gone through by the majority of the Bitcoin people. There's a couple Bitcoin Cash BCH was created because somebody said we need a better form of Bitcoin and this is what we want to do. And the majority stayed with the other one. And so what we call Bitcoin has always been the majority of all of those things that mostly happened early on. And today, the mechanism is there that all the nodes could change, but they're not going to do anything that's going to hurt them. And they're miners, and that it's a fair, easy system so that it stays the way it is. So you don't need to mine. You don't need to buy some other coin that's better. You just buy more Bitcoin. My philosophy right now is that the Bitcoin I own as an old man, I'm going to be around to see $1 million Bitcoin. That's not investment advice, just a number Warren pulled out of the air. And on that, I look at anything I pay today for Bitcoin is a fraction of that. It's trading at about 11%. Or a better way to look at it is an 89% discount over what I think the true value is. As all the banks and governments start to use it, hold Bitcoin reserves, that become more of a means to settle things between countries, between companies, that it'll be a standard. We may not trade in Bitcoin, but we'll be trading something based on Bitcoin. Oil has been used in the same way. Gold has been used in the same way. So it's not we're creating a whole new monetary system, but it's going to shift to where things can be denominated in Bitcoin. I'll go out on a limb and say that one's a prediction. This is not financial advice, not telling you that's why you have to have Bitcoin. But when I look at it's a discount. How can I accumulate more without doing anything that's not right for me? Any financial advisor in the world would look at what I have and say, you don't need more crypto. But most of the world doesn't have any crypto. And if every millionaire and above decided that they needed to buy some Bitcoin, either one at its current price or a fraction of one at a number they would invest, which is, let's say, tens of thousands of dollars, or round it off at 100,000, all the Bitcoin would be gone. It would take all the Bitcoin to fulfill that. If a government decides we're going to keep a reserve of billions of dollars, it's going to do that. One company that's done is MicroStrategy, and Michael Saylor, head of that company, he was required in the service agreements he has with the work they do as MicroStrategies to keep a whole lot of cash. And it was kept in a bank. And the bank was making money for holding that cash. And they looked at their balance sheet. They looked at where Bitcoin was, and they said, hey, we can accumulate Bitcoin. And at the time it was, 1/5 or 1/10 of what it is now. even if it was 1/2 of what it is now, it was definitely lower than that. They just said, we ought to keep some of our money in Bitcoin. And they did that. It has worked out so well for them, and they've accumulated more and more. Just saw where they were billions of dollars more into it. You'll reach a point where there's just not enough Bitcoin. There will only be 21 million Bitcoin ever. And as of yesterday, I looked, it was 19.8, I believe, million that are trading. The rest get mined over the next, and it gets harder and harder. Every 4 years, drops in half how many get mined. And it keeps going like that till the year 2140. We are still very early on in this. Things could change. Somebody could come up with a system better than Bitcoin. Many have tried. It could be entirely hacked, or an asteroid could hit the planet. Things can go some other ways. My prediction is that it's going to continue to be a safe investment for some time to come. I don't know whether or not that means that it's an investment for you or when it's going to go up and down. And definitely don't put the rent money in Bitcoin because you may need to pay your rent next month before Bitcoin doubles. So don't do that. Don't buy it at all if that's what you're doing. But if you want a long-term savings plan, I'd say something over 5 years, because there's never been a point since they created Bitcoin where a Bitcoin was worth less 5 years on. Even with the great crashes of 80, 90% that happened, it's never gone down to where holding it for 5 years didn't mean that it was going to be up. If you'd have bought just before that giant crash, 5 years later, it would be worth significantly more. You probably would have. If you were using it for rent money, you'd be in big trouble if it dropped by 90%. But it's something that's relying on math, and that's what they're. And pay attention. Maybe when they come up with something better, you'll know about it. But if some government or some company or some investment advisor tells Bitcoin is just play, it's not at this point. We're 15 years since the first pizza was bought with Bitcoin. So commerce started with it. And it was a couple years before that it was created. And that means is that it's gone steady. Major financial institutions are involved. There are funds of Bitcoins that allow the average investor, one's paying financial advisor, put some of their money in there. So if you have a retirement savings account and you say, hey, I'd like to allocate some of this to crypto, months ago, a year ago, most people in that profession were saying, don't do it. Now they're saying, oh, yeah, pretty soon, if you're somebody with a lot of money and your investment advisor is saying, no, never buy Bitcoin, and then it goes up quite a bit, and that guy's going to have a harder time keeping his job. And then that means if we take 1%, 0.5% of all the big investments like that, they're just talking trillions of dollars, we run out of Bitcoin, and the price has to go up for everybody to be able to get it. And then, so the Bitcoin itself will be safe. The ability to trade it for something else may change over time. I believe in the cryptology, and I believe they'll stay ahead of anything that can beat the cryptology. I believe in the method of being diversified. That's why I have a podcast called Distributed Conversation. I believe the whole world is better off when there's no central planning, that we only set up things that we can do in one community or one town or one family, one company, and then agree to certain standards that allow us to exchange things. Certainly, you don't want to, like everything you earn, keep under a mattress for a rainy day and then die on that mattress with money you've never done anything with. Think about what it's going to take to make the world a better place. One of those is to stop having to worry about whether or not next week's paycheck is going to come. It's to have enough stability that you know you're going to be okay, your family's going to be okay, and you can start looking at projects that are going to make the world a better place. There's still a lot of people that don't eat properly. There's a lot of people that have problems with clean drinking water, and a lot of people even housing, basic necessities of travel. If you can help them, figure out a way to help them. If you're one of them or just coming out of being one of them, let's say you have that mindset. Again, I don't think the people that are poor and destined to stay poor are going to be listening to my podcast. But hey, even if you're one of those people, do what you can, set something aside, start building. And always be thinking. There's the story of the widow's mite. The rich man gave a little bit that they could afford to give away without thinking about it. The widow gave her last 2 bits of copper. And it's a story from Jesus Christ. It says, which one has more favor in my sight? The one that gave everything. I don't think that was an instruction to give everything, but when you think about it, everything you have is something you gain by the great abundance that is this planet, how the universe is set up, allowed the miracle of you to happen. Be grateful for that and help others. Help yourself if you need to, then get helping other people. And that's where the real joy comes from. And I hope that some of what I say is giving you some instruction, some help to get that started. Either way, I hope you will come back next week. If you're still listening, please subscribe, share this with somebody, because if you got something out of it, there's people that don't know the things, let alone the things that we're able to put into this podcast, and we can all grow together. So please share this wherever you can. Appreciate it. I'm Warren Whitlock, and this has been Emerging Technology with Warren.